Hello. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. Just turning on my video. We'll get started here in just a couple of minutes. Just kind of wanted to say something out loud to make sure my audio is working okay. So, all right. So it's 10 o'clock here. Our time, excuse me. So we'll just get started. We got a couple of housekeeping items, but before we really get rolling, number one, just want to thank you for attending today. We're talking about the study list today and how you can use it to find, filter, and kind of search your ARM files. Kind of first item is if you have any questions as we're going through today, the chat is the best place to put those in. I just sent a message through there. There's been a couple already. Hopefully it'll pop up for you. That's been working very well in these webinars. So if there's something that I get going too fast on and you want to see again, definitely let me know. Or if you have a question on something that maybe I'm not talking about yet that you want to know about, or we're breezing through. Certainly you can pop the chat in kind of right when we're there, or if you want to hold it till the end, usually we have a couple of minutes at the end as well that we can hit up any questions you might have too. So the chat's kind of the place to go for that. Also, we are recording this session, so we'll be able to post this on our website later today. Same thing for all of our other webinars. So if you want to view this webinar again or want to see ones that we've done before, if you go out to our website at gdmdata.com, I've got a webinars page there kind of towards the bottom of the resources section. And so there is our list of webinar archives of ones we've done before, and today's will appear at the top of this list here later on this afternoon. So. All right, so we'll get started here. I have a couple of PowerPoint slides just to introduce kind of what we're going to talk about today, which is the study list. And it really, from the trainings that I've been to, I think I would be confident to say that it might be the most underutilized feature in ARM. It's usually pretty hard to get more than one or two hands in a room full of trainees to admit that they use the study list. But it has a lot of utility to it, a lot of power, and so we like to hammer on it. We like to talk about it a lot to try to get people to use it. So really, the study list, it's an indexed list of your ARM files. It's not a storage device. It's not it's not holding your files into the ARM system. It's simply a view. It's really just a list. It's a view of the ARM program's site that has seen which files you've opened and which files you've created. Really nothing more than that. There's some common misperceptions, I think, when you get started, that you think maybe all of the files are within the ARM system or something, but they're really just binary files. They're just like a Word document or an Excel sheet. Those trial files and the protocol files. So they live on your computer, whether it's on your hard drive, if you've got like a network location that everyone in the office can save to, maybe you use OneDrive or Dropbox, something like that too. You can choose where those files go, and they're just files that live wherever you'd like. And so the study list is simply a view of those files. And so we'll kind of show you how you can control even what files ARM is aware of in the study list, as well as kind of filter and dig through the files that it's found. Again, it's just a view. We're not manipulating data, and at this point, we're not changing or moving things around. It's really just ARM's view of things, and it's a great tool to search, is really the goal. So the study list, and maybe I'll open it without this overlay here. The study list is that big intimidating thing that ARM blasts you with as soon as you log in. I think for a beginning user of ARM, it's quite the introduction of all of this stuff going on here on your screen all at once. So we're going to kind of break it down into the manageable pieces here and explain each of the components, and hopefully that makes it a lot less intimidating. And so really there's really 5 sections to the study list. The main list, the actuality of what it is, the study list, that is your study grid. So that's the bottom half, and as we had seen there, it's just a table, and it's really a listing of all of your trials and protocol files. And there's a lot of different columns of information, and those are all the index pieces of information from those files. To the right, there's the selected study panel. I had mine hidden, but you can simply expand it, and then if you want it to stay expanded, there's a little pin button here. So if I drag that out so we can see a little bit more of what it does, it's essentially a visualization of that row. So as you see, as I change which file I have selected, it'll update the information there with what it found in the file. So a little bit easier way maybe to visualize the information in that study, as opposed to just looking across a really big long row in a table. It might be a little easier to view that. So if you're looking for something specific or just need a nice overview of the file, that's a nice panel. You can also drag and kind of rip this panel out as well. So I'm just going to grab the selected study section at the top and just click and drag my mouse to kind of tear it out of ARM there. So that's helpful if you have like a second monitor. I've got a second one, so I could run this over to my second monitor, which you won't be able to see, but you can see it, and have it maybe my whole other monitor, and I can just go back and forth. I can still continue to change this, and it'll just keep refreshing there on that panel wherever I might want. And you can always snap it back in to place there, and maybe I'll just hide it so we can see a little bit more of this list on my screen. So that's the bottom half there, really talking about the individual studies, which we use study as a general term for a protocol or a trial. Doesn't matter which one, so we'll kind of call those studies in general. The top half here, kind of the main portion of that, the top section is the filters section. And so these are kind of correspond to the different columns in the table, and they are filters. So the little gold box in ARM is a sign that there's a filter there, and so you can filter down the contents of the list, so that way you can narrow down your search. And we'll do a lot of that here today. To the left is the filter navigation bar. So this basically is a nice way to navigate this filter section. So you know, as we had saw, there's so many different columns of data that we're capturing. So therefore, there's a whole lot of filtering you can do. And so the navigation bar essentially just lets you jump around to the different sections of that filter. And you'll notice that as this moved, so as I clicked here, we moved to like the assessment data section of our filters. And it also moved the table down here. So we went to the column where we're actually clicked into. So if I click into soil texture, then we're in that soil moisture section, and we see that column first in the view. So they kind of all work in tandem together as you're making selections and making filters. Now that final portion to the right is the quick filters panel. So this has some automation, some quick tools to speed up and enhance the ability of the filters section. So over here, then there's some quick filters like trials. So if I click on this, it's immediately going to filter this list to only view trials. And we'll do some more examples to show kind of how the two of these can work together as well. At the bottom of this section, lists out your active filter. So this is a way to know if you've already filtered and started to search your list. So right now it says the active filter, we are seeing 50 out of a possible 66 studies. And so the filter is composed of active studies, and the study type is matching trial. So that was that quick filter we applied. So we tossed out any study that had a study type of protocol. So all the protocol files are being hidden from this view, and we're filtering only for trials. And so we found 50 out of our total of 66. If we want to clear that, go back to our full list, there's a button here at the bottom to remove filter. And now you can see the active filter updates and says 66 out of 66. We're viewing all of the studies in your list. So to demonstrate some of these filters, I'm just going to drag this panel down and kind of try to split it 50-50 a little bit. What I'm going to do is turn on this tutorial checkbox. And this would be something that way you could also duplicate. So the tutorial list, when you install ARM, it installs a few example files to your computer as well. They're just kind of stashed in your documents folder. Has its own kind of separate folder, so you know they're not real studies that you were working on. But it provides kind of a nice example that everyone has. So everyone should have these on their computer. It's kind of nice for me now. I can show you how to filter, and if you wanted to on your computer, you could follow and do those very same filters and see the same results, because really we'll have the same set of files. And so the other nice thing about these files is you're free to mess around with them all you want. So they're examples. We kind of tried to name them in a way that would kind of demonstrate what they're supposed to demonstrate. So they may show a few different types of features, things you can do in ARM, just examples of particular types of studies. So this first one is a fungicide trial. The next one here is a split plot. You know, there's ST examples, things like that. So hopefully the name kind of gives you an idea, but you're free to open up the file and change it in any way you want, run reports, you know, whatever you would want, just to try to learn and play with ARM and see some examples. And if you screw it up really bad, that's just fine, because there's actually under the utilities menu, you can restore the original tutorial studies. So you can even roll back any changes you may have made. You can get a fresh copy right as you had first seen them too. So you really have a full playground there to do whatever you would want without any consequence there within the files. So. All right, so what we can do here is, you know, quite a few different options for how we manage and look through this list. You know, number one, this large table here, you can sort kind of like you would almost do in Excel. So if I click a heading for a particular column, then ARM will sort the data by the contents of that column. So there we get an ascending, it's going to sort by the study ID. So if you're looking for a particular one, that's a nice easy way to you know, alphabetize all of the files, and then you can go down and find the one that you're looking for. The study ID, as I kind of mentioned, that term study is a generalization of trial and protocol ID. So, you know, if it's a protocol, then we're going to display the protocol ID contents. And then if you're in a trial, this is going to be the trial ID contents. So since we can display both of them here, we wanted to just kind of make that generalized, and that's what we have there. And it's kind of a primary, you know, the primary identifier for your file. So that's why that is over here. That's kind of the freeze frame, if you will, of the column that's always shown. But you certainly can find any other column that you would want to sort by. So I've got like investigators. So if I want to sort by the different investigators that created the files, there I've got the option to sort that by ascending or descending. If you click it again, it'll go in the reverse order. By default, if I find the right column here, it'll sort by the last opened. So there's a last open date, and it looks like I've rebuilt recently, so they've all been opened the same time, or maybe not quite. Some of them are even older. But that's kind of the default, and that basically gives you a recent files list, if you will. So that'll be the default sort for the list. So as you're opening and changing studies, they'll float to the top here of this list. So it's a nice way to see the ones you've been working on recently. If you're going kind of in and out of files, the ones you've been working with recently will be at the top by default, unless you change the sorting. So, you know, you could also change by last changed. So one that maybe I was in, but it didn't change. You don't want to see that, but instead I'd rather have you know, actually changes that I've saved. So this one is one I've worked with most recently and actually saved changes. So. All right, so let's use this filters section at the top to start whittling down our list. So right now, if we notice, I've got 61 on my 62 studies active. And so that's actually a good point to show there's active studies. So what you can do with a study, if you really don't want to see it in the list by default, is you can archive it. And so I have done that with one of my files, and maybe we'll do that with, I'll just pick this one most recently. So you could right click on a file and choose archive, and then it'll hide it by default. So archived is kind of the opposite of active. It's not active. And so you can choose include archive studies, and then you'll be able to see all of them. And so that's the difference there. That's why we only had 61 originally, is we had one of these files was kind of hidden with that archive. Now I've got a couple of them. So if I turn that off, yep, we're starting with 60 out of 62. All right, so kind of the main interface for finding and starting to filter down this list to find pieces you would want would be this filters tool here. So you know, one real simple one would be like the trial year. So what you could do is just simply type in 2019. I want to filter down and only see studies that were from 2019. So if I type in and then press enter, you can see now that I'm down to 10 out of my 62 studies. So I've had 10 studies that were in 2019, and that's the list right there. We can also use this quick filter. So maybe instead of wanting to match exactly 2019, maybe I want the opposite. Maybe I want everything except 2019. So since I have my cursor in this field and I've entered the value that I want to filter on, then if I use this quick filter to do everything except, it's going to kind of give me the opposite. So now it's going to do everything except 2019 will be displayed in the list. So I've got 2014s, 2013s, some of them are blank. And now we kind of have the opposite. Those 12 that we were looking at, now those are the only ones that we don't get to view. And so now we have 50 out of 62 visible. You could also use this to see empty. So if I choose this one, it's going to filter for only studies that have a blank trial year. So that might be a nice way to check. I need to update these because there's no reason I would want 2019, or I wouldn't, no reason I would not want a trial year in there, and I should make sure to get that in there. Question here is 2019 the year the trial was entered into ARM? Yes. So specifically, if you had opened one of these studies, maybe we'll open a file here. You'll find on the header editor, there's the trial year field, and that's really what we're searching for. So in each of these files, if you were to open it up and look at the trial year in the header editor, that's the content that we're seeing. So if I open up this LWA, we'll find out that trial year field is blank. So if I go to my header, sure enough, it's blank. And so if I wanted to update that and say, yep, this is actually this current year that I'm working on this, I should put in our year, and then I can save. Now when we go back to our list, it'll update and have that information in there. So that's really what we're looking at, is specifically the information that has been entered in the study. Another tip here that's related to the study list is this black X over here on the toolbar. It's kind of a crowd pleaser in our trainings. A lot of people might just think, okay, I have a file open, I'll use the X up in this upper right corner to close ARM, and I'll open another file. If you use this X instead, ARM will close the study that you had open, but it'll keep the window itself active. And so now we get brought back to the study list. You don't have to log into ARM again, and we can choose another study from our study list. So that's a nice time saver if you're used to just opening up a file and then closing the ARM entirely, and then I have to log in again to open another file. It's that black X when you have a study open. That'll close the file without closing the whole ARM program, that whole entire window session at one time. And so now we've returned to our study list, and you'll actually notice that LWA is nowhere to be found. And that's because we still have that same filter applied. And so we're only viewing those that have the trial year of blank. But we just fixed that, and ours is not blank anymore. So if I want, I can, let's right click on this trial year and remove filter. So now I get to see all of them, and that one we just edited, the LWA, you can see now that's been updated since we filled in the trial year content in that study. Now it says 2020. So that's a good way using that blank fields is a way to kind of double check your studies. any of these fields that would be important to fill in, site description. If you wanted to make sure you're filling in your trial address, let's filter down the blank ones and make sure that I'm filling them in. Well, it looks like most of mine don't have an address. Maybe the country is maybe filled in a little better. So let's see, only ones that are empty. Okay, these are the ones I've got to fill in to make sure I've got the right information. So you can utilize some of these filters to be checks on yourself, on the files that you're working on, to make sure you filled in information that you should. All right, so I've got a couple of filters here. So I'm just going to remove filter and start fresh again. So again, any of these columns that we've indexed across all of these different editors that you've recognized from trials and protocols, you can filter on. And so that gives you a lot of flexibility, pretty much kind of any question you may ask of what I'm looking for, chances are you'll be able to do that. So, a common one might be, what work have we done in the past for a particular product? Well, you can use the study list to do that. So if you find like the treatment name here, if you use the gold filter box, this displays all of the unique treatment names that are found across all of these 60 studies that we are currently have visible in our study list. So maybe I've got like these two kind of fake products, Super Stomp and Sure Kill. They're used kind of across some of our examples. So maybe those are the two products that we're interested in. What kind of studies have we done on those? So if I just choose the checkbox here to pick the two of them, I'm going to include those and say, okay. Now we're filtering for any study that has Super Stomp or Sure Kill in the treatment name. And so now we found 30 out of our 62. So about half of them have those products in them. The nice thing with this filtering is that it's cascading. So it will, if we apply another filter, it'll filter only on the 30 that we're currently viewing. So maybe we're wondering, okay, well, what kind of crops have we used these products on? So if I go to the site description, crop and pest, I can look, maybe we'll filter on crop name. This list can actually be useful just to see what we've done. So, okay, well, we've done work with corn and grape and beet, soybean, and both spring and winter wheat. So that might be valuable in and of itself. Or maybe, okay, we're really interested in wheat. So what have we, what products have we done with wheat? Or what studies have we done? So if I choose those two and say, okay, now we're down to 5. So now you have the list of any study that you've done with those 2 products and on the particular crops that we chose. So now you found the 5, and you can relay that information of this is what we've done on that particular question. It can be really any question you may ask. If you can find the field to filter for it, then the study list can give you that answer. And to that end, and this will hopefully kind of help with the question that was just asked, is maybe you want to provide somebody the list of studies for that question. So what you can do is use this clipboard button. And there's a little arrow on that button, which means there's actually 2 different flavors of the clipboard. So I'm going to show you the copy all first here. So if you choose the copy all, it's going to grab all of the information in this table just for the filtered rows. And now if I want to open up Excel, and if I paste, it brings in all of these are kind of your column headings here, and it's going to bring in all of the information that's been indexed in that study list for your filtered studies. So now we can, maybe hack out any columns we don't want. but we can provide a really nice slick summary of exactly what work we've done on, you know, that question that was posed on sure kill and super stop with the with any of either wheat that we've done. And so this has a lot of utility there to provide a summary of what you've done. So that's kind of the way you would export. So to answer the question about exporting or printing out kind of what you have in the list, that clipboard is the way to do that. And I'll grab all of the information as you see in the study list that then is just on the clipboard. Excel is probably the #1 place to put that in, and then you can format and do what you would want there. So we see just these 5 filters here. Let's close or clear out that filter again. So we have our full list. So, you know, there's a great utility of kind of searching and finding your files. The important thing is then, well, how is ARM going to know about my files kind of at all? And so to show this, I'm going to turn off my tutorial because the action to find files is a little different when you're in the tutorial. So, but essentially what we can do, by default, ARM will just slowly build up the study list. So the very first time you came into ARM, it probably said there are no studies for the current filter or something like that. It was totally empty because you had never opened up a study or created one before. Well, as you go and create files, or maybe open files that are sent in an email or, you know, already out in the network, your list on your computer will slowly build. So each time you open up a study, ARM will add it to the list of ones you've worked on. So you can continue to just kind of build from scratch as you're opening them up, or you can have ARM go out and find files that have already been saved on your computer or elsewhere. And so to do that, there's a rebuild button in the corner of the screen. And there's also a utilities menu to rebuild your study list. Either one will get you here to this dialog. And you may also recognize that sometimes ARM will prompt you to rebuild your study list after we've installed an update, where maybe we've had more fields that are indexed, things like that. You may be asked to rebuild as well. So what we can do is tell ARM to go out to a specific path that can be found on your computer, and ARM can then find all of the trials and all of the protocols in that folder, and optionally any subfolder underneath there, and add those into the study list. So if I want to, I can browse out, and I've got a folder on my desktop where I just dump all of my training examples in. So maybe I want to have that as my high-level folder, and ARM will look in any of these other folders, and as long as I have that search subfolders option, it'll look in any of those folders and grab any protocol or trial and then add it to my list. So more likely for you, you maybe have a you know, ARM files folder, and then maybe a 2019, 2020, you know, kind of each year that you work on it maybe. You can kind of choose then how you'd want to rebuild. Do I only want to choose my 2020 folder because I only want to see what I'm working on right now? Or maybe if I'm being asked that question, to go search in our archives, if you will, of all of the files we've done the last 10 years, you know, what have we worked on? Well, then pick that higher level, and you can build all 10 years worth of study folders. You can find all of those there and then put them in your list. Again, that's kind of the nice thing about the study list, is we're not changing data. It's really only this temporary view. It's actually literally just a database file that's keeping track of this information as we open up. ARM will open up each study real quickly just to fill in a row in the database, and then we can sit and filter it, is essentially all we're doing here with the study list. So I'm going to choose my training folder to grab everything. We'll kind of imagine that that's maybe my master level, and we'll grab all years worth of studies. This other option here for all known paths, ARM will just kind of keep tabs on where you open files from and can build this list. So that would be useful if you don't really want to go out and find anything new, but you're just trying to do an in-place kind of update of what you've already opened. That might be useful to just utilize folders that you've already opened studies from. And again, make sure you have that option on if you want ARM to dig deeper into the other subfolders too. The rebuild method, what you can do is clear your existing list. So whatever you have already there, we're just going to toss out. We're going to start with a completely empty list and build from that folder that we chose. So in my case, that's what I'm going to want to do. I think most of these files are already in there, so it'll be a wash anyway. But if you had, you could also use this update list. So essentially it'll keep whatever you have already in your list and it'll only add anything new. So if you wanted to maybe have just in your list the 2020 studies and also your 2019 studies, I don't want to go all back and see hundreds of files, but it would be nice to see maybe last year's studies too. I might need to open and reference those. Then you could come in here and choose your 2020 folder and clear the list. And then after it's done building, come back, choose your 2019 folder, and then do an update. So that way the list itself that you just built stays in place, and then it'll find any of those studies in 2019 and add those to your list. And now your study list will consist of just 2020 and 2019. So kind of up to you on what you're trying to accomplish, but this rebuilding is really just a way to settle the score, get a fresh start, or continue to add and find more. You can also, there's an option here to update information in the study list for information that's changed. So if you've been working with several colleagues and all of your files are out on the network and you want to kind of update your table because you know people have been adding information, you can run an update. And so basically you don't need to necessarily even add any new files, but you really just want to get updated with changes everyone's been making. Then that option is really nice. So now you can see when you're filtering your list to find files or checking to see if pieces of information are blank and should be filled in, you can know what's out there, what's been updated if you personally haven't been updating them. And finally, that last one is to make sure you want to add studies that aren't currently in the list. So those might work hand in hand kind of as opposites, what your goal is. I just want to update in place, or maybe I want to add things that I already have. Maybe I want to do both and make sure I know everything there. So in my case, I think I'm just going to clear. So there's really not going to be anything to update, and we'll just be adding everything essentially. So now when I click OK, I've kind of alluded to this, but ARM is going to go out to this folder and it's going to search in that folder and all of the subfolders. And as soon as it finds a protocol or a trial, it's going to open it really quickly in order to fill in the row here in the study list. And that's going to move to the next one and the next one. So when I click OK, we'll see that it's going to start the rebuild. And it's going to discover all of the files that we're going to add to the list. And then they'll be a dialog that shows up once it finds all of them, and it'll kind of count through as it fills in your list. So here it says, okay, we found 102. So I've got quite a few piling up here. And so it's just going to walk through, as I said, real quickly. It opens that study just enough to be able to read in the information that we need to index in the table. And so it'll just slowly kind of chug along and kind of show its progress. The nice thing is this is a separate session of ARM. So if you did need to work, you could certainly open up a file and in another window, that building will happen. So here I can start editing that study if I want, and in the background here, it'll just keep rebuilding. So if you have to wait a long time, you don't have to sit there with your hands tied. ARM will just keep filling in the study list. And if I close this, we'll see that the list is filling in, even though it's not all the way done. getting there. So there it goes, and if we let it go all the way, then it will refresh and see the whole list again. So. And it looks like I'm still filtered by trial year. That's why we only see 10, even though so far it just already got 68. So let me remove filter again. And I bet we're just about done. Okay, so you can see it kind of rebuilt there. Well, it still's got my filter here, so let's remove that. And so now I've got 102. So these are all of there's probably quite a few duplicates and stuff there from my different kind of archives of training files that I've done. So that rebuilding is really powerful as well. And you can do that as many times as you want. Again, it's just a view. We're not changing files. If we build to a different folder and we forget about all of the studies that were in this folder, it's not that it's going to delete the files. They're still going to be on my computer, on my desktop, but ARM will just forget about them and not have them in its list. And that's really all it's going to do. That's also useful if you have moved files around. So if you suddenly, if I moved some of the files just from my desktop, moved them into different folders, changed the name of the file, things like that, then if you're doing that outside of ARM, then ARM won't know that you've made those changes. And if you notice, actually, I'm going to scroll all the way to the right. The very last column here is the study file path. And so what ARM does is it remembers where you saved that folder or that file and recorded that path. And so if I were to rename this folder and call it, instead of weather, I call it something else. Or if I were to move this trial file outside of my weather folder and put it in events, or put it straight to my desktop or something like that, then when I open it up, ARM is going to think it's a totally different file. Okay, I don't have that path already in here, so it must be a new file. Let me add it to the list. Well, then it's going to kind of look and go, well, wait a minute, pretty much everything, as I look down this row, your ID is the same, the project ID is the same, everything's the same as something else you already have in this list. Is this a duplicate? And so you may see that when you're opening the file, and depending on how many things line up, it might even open the file as read-only and says, hey, we need to resolve this because from what I can tell, this is the exact same file as another one you've opened, and I don't want you to create duplicates because that can be a huge mess. And so if you've moved files around, then that's probably what's going on, is that ARM still has a memory of where you opened it before, even though that doesn't even exist necessarily. And so to fix things like that, you can just do a rebuild. After you've moved files around or renamed folders, things like that, just do a rebuild and clear the old list out. So ARM forgets where it's opened files before, and it'll relearn where those are all at if you just point it out to that folder. So that's kind of a common support question we get. And that's really the motivation, is ARM doesn't want you to accidentally create a duplicate because maybe you'll open it from one folder one day and put in a bunch of data. And then the next day, if you open that same named file, but it's in a different folder, you're going to panic and go, where's my data? You won't want to put information in two different files or something. So that's another good use to the rebuild. Let me toggle back to the tutorial. So I do a couple of more filters. In here, it remembered my filter. So if you ever come in here and there aren't any files visible, or there are not nearly as many as you were expecting, that it might just be that there's a filter applied. So I always kind of look here and go, oh, okay, there's only 6 because we have that filter still in place that it remembered the last time we had the tutorial list open. So I'm just going to clear that filter, and now I can see everything again. One more use I don't think I showed here in the filters is if I want to, I can search not an exact match. So earlier we did trial year. I wanted to exactly match 2019, and that's how we searched. You can also do a contains. So like in the title, I want to see any title that has the word example anywhere in the title. So you can type in the value there, and then if you right click and do a contains, or you could also utilize in the quick filters, there's a contains button. And if you choose that, what it does is it puts these wildcards, it puts asterisks around it. So if you're familiar with wildcards, you've used them before, you can hand type that as well. So if I had started with a blank one here with no filter, if I knew how to use those and I just wanted to say example, you can certainly do that as well. But what that contains does is now it's going to show me only those with title where the content from the title somewhere in there has the word example. So that one, it starts with it. Now you can find it halfway in between for a lot of these other ones. So you have the ability to search that way. Like we said, that if you want to remember kind of what you can do, check this quick filter. So you can do a contains, you can do a start a field. So if you wanted only to start with the word example and then anything else goes, now we can see we've only got 3 where it really starts with the word example. And you can do that for really any of these fields here. Whole field will be that exact match that we had done before. And so there's no exact match that only has the word example in it, although in maybe something like the treatment type field, it'd be a lot easier to have an example. So if we did FERT and did a whole field on that, then you'll see only studies that have a treatment type exactly matching FERT, fertilizer. And then you can also clear the filter if you just click that button as well. So this list here is kind of a nice way to see what you can do with the text box, the field that you've clicked in here. But you can also right click and see kind of that same list as well. If you do a numeric field, so something like trial year, that has numeric value to it, then the filter for appears, and you can actually type in a range as well. So if I wanted the last 2 years, I can type in my range. And so that'll get anything between those 2 values. And maybe I can do something a little bit more interesting, like 2017 to 2020. That'll search across a range. And that's because that trial year is a number. So that might not be available for something like location, but it would be available for numeric fields. Or if you're in like a date, you wouldn't type in a number, but actually you can pick a date and do a range that way. So if I pick, I don't know if I have any there, they're that close. Nope, none of them were that way. Maybe if I did April 2019, there we go, we got a couple of that popped up. So you can use that filter for a date range if you're in a date field. And that's also available in the right click for that field. And you can also right click. So let me clear my filters again. You can also right click in the table itself. So if I wanted to filter for the initiation date, since that's a date, we kind of get this extra control here. If I was just doing something where it's straight text, the filter for just let you type in, and that's where I could use that example. So if I found that title field again, did a filter for a type example, you get that very same result as using it up here. So it kind of depends on the way you do it. There's more than one way to get the same result. You can also, since we're clicking there, if we find something like the status here, if you click on a row, so the final stats, maybe I want to view and filter only for those that are status equals F. which I assume is probably final. If you right-click on the row that has that content, there's also a right-click to filter by that content. So a nice way to view if that's the value you want, and you want to see everything else that matches that, the right-click filter by, and then that value will load there. So if I right-click in the good, it's going to say filter by good. Now I'm only going to view filter for things that contain the match, exactly match the contents, which was the word good in this case. So we've done a lot of filtering, and as we've done each of those filters, when we clear out the filter to say we're done, ARM actually remembers that filter. So there's this previous filters button with a little arrow. So that means there's a little more to see here. And so as you define filters, ARM will save a list. So it's kind of handy if you remember, oh, last week I looked at that list of the super stop and short kill. Let me go find it. And if you just click that in the table and say, okay, it'll immediately reapply that filter just the way you had it. Because yeah, I should have saved the Excel sheet, but I didn't, and now I want it again. Well, you could just come back and run that very same filter. Or maybe I want to rebuild my list to look at a different data set and then run that same filter on it. That would be another use case for that. So it just keeps a running list. It goes way back. Looks like we probably added the feature around 2018 because that's how far back mine goes, of all the different filters you would apply. I do want to show that other flavor of the clipboard. So so we had this copy map info, but to do that, I think I want to filter. I find the latitude. I want to see only things on my list that have GPS coordinates in them. So to do that, I could choose here those that are blank and click the exclude button. And now it's going to exclude anything that matches the items that I picked, which in this case is the ones that are blank. So now it's going to show me only trials, because in a protocol there is no latitude and longitude. So only trials that actually have GPS coordinates is what I want to filter by. Because then if I use this copy map info, it's going to, if I show you in Excel first, it copies just the columns with the study ID, the latitude, and the longitude. So just those columns, kind of instead of that copy all where we got every column in the filtered list, it's going to take the filtered list of studies and just bring you the ID and your GPS coordinates. It also brought up a web page, and you certainly don't have to use this. This Batch Geo was a website we had just found. It's a free way to make a map. But if you want to use Google Earth or whatever program you would use, you're free to do that. You have that data on your clipboard, and you can paste that into whatever you would like. But the Batch Geo was just a nice example that we used. Here, if you want to use that, you just paste in your data and map now. When we first did this, it would actually just immediately show you a map. Now it wants to send you an email, and it's pretty much instant. Normally by the time I start up my Outlook to go retrieve the email, it's already there waiting for me. I had done this earlier, so we don't have to wait for my email, but it will come up with a message, and it just gives you a link here to your map. So this is one I had done earlier. I think I had just filtered for the ones that are in Europe. So it's just going to map each of those trial IDs or study IDs with the GPS location, and it's going to put those all on a map. And so we've got the study ID there is really all the information that we included in that paste, but a real nice way to really immediately bring up a map of your trials that you filtered. So here I was pretty open with, this is just our tutorial list. So I think these were probably ones that our GDM representatives in Europe probably supplied us as examples. So that's kind of why they're all in Europe right now. But they would show up with whatever studies and locations that you have in your list. And you're free to use, you can take advantage of that filtering. I only filtered to take out ones that didn't have GPS coordinates, but if you want to filter more for only those at, with a particular investigator name. So I only want to see ones that have my name, which I got a dummy license that has the term your name is the investigator. So maybe I only want to filter for those. And now I can map out and copy that for just those that have my name. Just notice when you paste that it's got a lot fewer. It's just those studies that match that filter. So that's another nice automation to kind of bring out some of that information as you search and find what you want, to be able to take some of that out and utilize it in another program. So yeah, so that's really kind of the two. There's two main uses for the study list. I think when we first, a lot of times we kind of want to encourage people to use it to open studies. That's kind of why we have it pop up when you first open up ARM if you haven't double clicked on a file. To be honest, the more I talk with people, the less I think it's possible to convince people to use it that way necessarily. There's just something about opening up a file browser. You've got all of your folders the way you've organized them, and it's easy to find your files. So I'm not gonna don't think I'm going to win too many people over for sure to say that you can always use the study list instead of browsing. It is certainly possible, as we had shown, that if you can double click on a study that's in your list and it opens it in the software, you make your changes, you can close it, and you're immediately brought back to this list and you can find your next one. There's certainly the capability to do that. But if you don't quite dive all the way into using it in that fashion, it's still a really powerful searching tool. And being able to find what you're looking for, whether it's in your archives of 10, 15 years of research that you want to go and dig through, or just to do a quick summary of your last, of the current year, the 2020 studies. If you're a manager that you want to see where everyone is at, rebuilding out to the network drive where everyone's been working on their studies, you can get a nice overview and dig into studies that are missing certain information or contain certain information you want to find. I think at least being able to realize that potential here with the study list can be a really, really big time saver. One of the last trainings we were at earlier this year, somebody had said that they had said that when we kind of showed that finding blanks, they just shook their head because they said, we spent 3 days last week opening up every single file we had to try to find which ones were blank and make sure we had things up to date. And yeah, and it was just, okay, within 20 seconds, they could have had that list and bing, bing, boom, edited the ones they wanted. So there's just lots of time-saving potential here to use the list. And like I said at the beginning, that's kind of one of our big training pet peeves, if you will, that we want to get out there and talk about as much as we can to get people to know its potential and use it. I think a few years back, one of the larger companies that use ARM, they had spent a lot of money on a tool that then we were I think just showing an update. We were giving them kind of a rundown of some of the changes we made, and we kind of showed them the study list. And a couple of them kind of looked at each other and said, did you know this was here? No. And they had a developer come and essentially develop, you know, the kind of searching capability just on the side, and they didn't even realize it is there in ARMs. So lots of power, lots of potential, and certainly kind of just as you play with it, you may become more familiar with what you would want to do. Really, the possibilities are endless as you just look at how many different fields we've indexed, how many different fields you can search for. You can do those. You can do a consistency check. So, like if we want to look at your assessment data and filter in the rating types, this will kind of show you across all of the data columns in all of the studies you currently have filtered and visible. You can see the different rating types that are present. And so this might be a good way. Someone had mentioned ST. This would be a great tool for somebody that's using ST as well, that you can see for inconsistencies. So like, for example, we've got a control and control. So I think the control is probably the SART code that was chosen from the validation list, and then maybe control with the L, somebody maybe just hand typed. So this would be a nice way to maybe go and say, okay, well, I need to standardize this. So show me the ones that said control. Okay, so we've just got this one file here. Let me open it up, and we can adjust the rating type to make it match. So that's another good use to standardize, whether it's the rating type or rating unit. Those are kind of the assessment data pieces, but you could do the same thing with treatments too. So if you had a treatment name that you wanted to standardize, that it'd be pretty easy to, not seeing any super obvious one where there's just a slight difference between them, but if you had wanted to standardize because you knew there was kind of two different ways people were maybe entering their treatment names or something, pretty easy to go in and find those. And instead of opening every single file you have to see which one's in and which one's isn't, use the search there. So, all right, thanks for the comment. I'm glad that this was useful. Looks like we've got one convert at least. Great to hear that you did use it. You did use it already. Like I said, just probably the last 4 trainings I think that I was at, a couple of universities. I think across those 4, I had 2 people that raised their hand to say that they used the study list. Maybe some of them were shy, but I was like, oh man, I got to change that. So I'm glad that you had used it and that you liked it. We're about to the end of our hour. You know, if you had any questions, I can definitely hang around for a minute or 2 more if you have them, or if you want, send me an email later too. That works as well. But really appreciate you guys all taking the time to join us today, and hopefully there'll be some tips and things that you learned today. We've got a couple more webinars later this week. As long as we keep having attentive listeners such as yourselves, we'll kind of keep churning out some of these webinars. So thanks everybody for joining us. And like I said, I'll hang on the line for a minute while everyone leaves if there is another question. But thanks for attending.